Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, Havana Nights at the Springfield Symphony and an exploration of punctuation with the serial comma, a.k.a. the Harvard comma, a.k.a. the Oxford comma with our word nerd.
But first...
Cornelius, age 8.
A discovery brings strangers together.
Seeing those names, it humanized it for me.
Every time I say I'm the 5th generation of Zeke Quarterman, an enslaved man, part of me dies.
On a journey across the years.
Field article number 15, 40 acres, a mule, and $200. Abraham Lincoln is assassinated. The enslaved got nothing.
Congress passes the Homestead Act, Social Security, the GI Bill, the FHA.
Now, when we come to Washington, we're coming to get our check.
Mom, I love you. I can't breathe.
Connected by a common cause.
Harm happens locally, so repair has to happen locally. Do the work. Look at your own history. What was your family's role?
Seeking justice and peace. The Cost of Inheritance, a special edition of America Reframed.
The Cost of Inheritance is a film by Yoruba Rishan about the U.S. reparations debate, and NEPM presents a special screening and discussion of the film this coming Tuesday, February 13th at 5:30 p.m. in Springfield College's Appleton Auditorium at the Fuller Arts Center.
It's a night of storytelling and dialogue and an opportunity to learn more about the reparative justice work happening here in Western Mass. Following the screening, there'll be a panel discussion with two of the film's subjects, Brianna Cuffey and Lottie Liebdula, and local experts, Dr. Alicia Jolly and Dr. Stephen M. Bradley, Black Studies professors at Amherst College, as well as Michelle Miller, chair of Amherst African Heritage Reparation Assembly.
And joining us today to talk about the screening and discussion is Dr. Stephen Bradley of Amherst College and Michelle Miller from Amherst Reparation Assembly. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This was a hard watch. It's a good documentary, but it was heavy.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that feels like the general feeling behind reparations as a whole. And am I misthinking that the panel discussion after the movie is shown is going to speak more to how reparations look in the area?
Michelle?
Well,
go ahead. Dr. Stephanie Bradley.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Oh, as I understand it, it's to, there'll be a more general discussion as well as a discussion about the specifics of the work that Michelle and several others have been making over these past few years. And so there'll be enough for everybody to bite into with regard to reparations.
Have you both had a chance to see the documentary?
Yes, I have. I've seen it twice.
What about you, Dr. Bradley?
I have as well, yes.
It's really powerful, and maybe to look at more of the historical aspect of reparations, we would go to you, Professor Bradley, because it does talk about how many times in the course of history since the end of slavery, this has come to the fore with Callie House to Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X to John Conyers. But if a lot of those names people might have heard of, but I was really impressed, and I hadn't heard the story of Callie House, which is talked about in this documentary. Do you want to share a little bit about her story and her work?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you saw where Professor Berry in the documentary, she's more of an expert about Callie House, but this is during a period where enslavement had barely ended or was about to end, recognizing the idea that something had to be owed to Black people who worked for free during those wretched years. And so she appealed to the U.S. government for recompense for the work that was done. And this was so outrageous to a lot of different people on its face because they thought Black people should be happy that they had freedom without even recognizing the idea that they had nothing but freedom. And then they thought it was outrageous that a woman would be stepping out and talking about politics, talking about policy, which is something that wasn't quite normal during the period.
Why do you think it is that the economic equity that would come with reparations is so subsumed under the social equity that is sought for racial justice.
How do you mean? How do you mean?
So and I'm thinking about this in particular because we were talking about this yesterday with an organization that specifically is looking at the disenfranchised communities of color and how to make them more economically resilient. There is an ongoing struggle economically with this fight that often gets overlooked when we're looking at social justice. And I think that's a large part of the call for reparations, that the economic justice should come hand in hand with the social justice, but it isn't often looked at. And I'm curious as to why. Is it just the money?
Well, just the money. Money plays a large role, but I think when we talk about reparations, it quickly becomes an emotional issue for a lot of people. The idea that my ancestors, I wasn't alive when slavery existed, and white people say, I didn't own any slaves personally, so people take offense to the idea, and so socially it becomes an issue of who's to take blame for the issue of slavery and Jim Crow. But then I think there's something more substantive to the argument, and that is this racial wealth gap that exists in the United States, and that's undeniable. So economists, if they're being fair, when they speak to this very subject, talk about the fact that it's the gap that exists between Black and white wealth holders is so wide that there's hardly any way to fill that gap without the influx of a certain kind of revenue. And that's where reparations comes in. The reason why the gap is so wide is the inability of newly freed Black workers and Black workers during Jim Crow to purchase homes that advanced in their value, to put their money in banks and watch it grow there, to participate in the stock market in a lot of different ways. And so all of these things deny wealth, and now we're seeing the manifestations of those denials.
We're speaking with Dr. Stephen Bradley from Amherst College and Michelle Miller from Amherst Reparation Assembly about the documentary, The Cost of Inheritance. NEPM will be hosting a screening of this documentary next week. I challenge anybody to watch this documentary and not say it doesn't present a compelling argument for why reparations need to happen. And it happens in the documentary on a small person-to-person scale while these larger conversations are happening municipality-wise, statewide, and maybe even eventually federally. You, Michelle, in Amherst are part of Amherst Reparation Assembly. What's the latest going on municipally in Amherst towards reparations?
Well, Monty, we submitted our final report to the town council in September. And at this point, with the turning over to a new council, we're waiting for a successor body to be formed. That successor body, we hope, will take the recommendations that we made and begin to implement them. So the town has committed to $2 million in reparations funding. And the report that we published outlines a variety of recommendations, ways to use that funding. And this was based on a consultative process that we went through with the community here, both the Black community and the entire community, to identify what reparations means in Amherst, which of course will be different for each community that decides to look at this.
Any idea how that $2 million will be put out there? Where exactly will it go? Will it go to individuals? Will it go to programs, organizations?
That's a great question. We identified 3 funding areas. We identified youth programming, affordable housing, and business grants as our funding priorities based on the conversations that we had in the community. There will be some limitations legally. The town, I believe now, is looking into what those limitations are. and how we might make anything from a direct cash payment all the way through to benefits that will support the entire community.
If you watch this documentary, The Cost of Inheritance, it really breaks down how redlining and the GI Bill and Social Security and the Catholic Church all worked against accumulating wealth post-slavery.
And frankly, like how if this had been addressed in the early stages of freedom for formerly enslaved peoples, this would not be the bigger problem that it is now.
Like that there were Japanese reparations after the internment after World War II. That did go out. This is also all in the documentary. Meanwhile, Amherst is having this conversation as a municipality. Dr. Bradley from Amherst College, do you think that this needs to happen from the municipal level like this? Or should these conversations only be happening on a national or maybe on a state-by-state scale?
Well, first let me say how courageous the people in Amherst and Evanston and a couple of other places are for taking up the issue of reparations. It scares the bejesus out of so many people. So I'm glad that they took it up. But I have the sneaking suspicion, and more than suspicion, I know that movements like these have to come from the ground up. And there's been a lot of groundwork over the course of the last century or so pushing in this direction. Amherst is in the vanguard of showing what's possible at a local level. You asked, should it be taken up at the federal level? I think so. And John Conyers and so many others, Cori Bush now, so many others think that it should be taken up at the federal level. But let's be clear about this. Nothing gets done at the federal level right now.
Right.
And so it's going to take local municipalities to show people how to get this particular endeavor completed. And I think it might happen at the state level. My good friend Cheryl Grills headed up the reparations task force or commission in the state of California, and they were able to put forth a report as well. And hopefully courageous states will be able to take up the issue as well.
We're speaking with Dr. Stephen Bradley from Amherst College and Michelle Miller from Amherst Reparation Assembly.
The Amherst Reparations Assembly is not the only one in the state. There was one formed in 1/2 formed in Northampton and one in Boston. Are you aware, Michelle, of any differences between the way that the ones in Boston or Northampton have been run and what they've been looking at in their communities? And did that influence the report that you submitted at all?
Yeah, I think each community will be a little different. We were a bit ahead of Northampton and Boston. We're very much eager to see what their findings will be and what process they go through. I think each community has an opportunity to define for itself what reparations is. And so we're definitely watching. We've been in contact with Northampton several times and hoping to link arms with other communities who are also working on this so that we can provide support for one another. It is, we're sort of paving a path here, and I think the support of working together community by community is really necessary.
Michelle Miller is part of Amherst Reparation Assembly. Dr. Stephen Bradley is from Amherst College. They will both be part of the panel discussion after the NEPM screening of The Cost of Inheritance this coming Tuesday, February 13th at Springfield College. It is a fascinating documentary, and if you are on the fence about your own role in the world of reparations, I urge you strongly to watch this. And
even if you're not, it's worth a watch.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Yes,
thank you.
Later in the show, bridging and building community through music with the Springfield Symphony Orchestra and their Havana Nights program.
But first, we punctuate with a listener question from Anne from Montague, comma, the word nerd, Emily Brewster, comma, and the Oxford, comma.
Vampire Weekend doesn't care about them, but I sure do. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Time for another Word Nerd segment with Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster, who is going to go toe-to-toe with somebody who lives just a couple towns over from where Emily Brewster lives in Montague.
It's a Word Nerd Thunderdome!
Yeah! self-proclaimed member of the Montague Word Police. We got an email from Anne who says that she really enjoyed the segment about apostrophes last time. It was the first she'd heard the Word Nerd segment and wanted to make some suggestions for future topics and gave us a bunch of really great topics that we can tackle. You could send us some great topics to tackle too, listener. thefab413@nepm.org. But the one we're going to tackle that Anne suggested, the self-declared Montague Word Police, has to do with commas, specifically the Oxford comma. For those who don't know what an Oxford comma is and don't know the Vampire Weekend song. What is an Oxford comma?
An Oxford comma is a comma that simply precedes the and or the or near the end of a list, when you've got two or more items being listed.
Why do they call it an Oxford comma? Is it the dictionary, the school, a little bit of both?
It's the publishing company. It is also called the Harvard comma, and it is most neutrally called the cereal comma, not the kind you eat, the SERIAL.
Like killers.
What?
Like killers.
Oh, serial killers. Yeah, right.
Killer commas.
But nicer.
Yes.
Merriam-Webster also uses the serial comma, and I personally use the serial comma to a fault. I put it in the name of Bed Bath & Beyond.
Bloodbath and Beyond.
I mean, that's a great metal band name.
Yeah, I think it was a Simpsons reference, actually.
Careful there, Annie Oakley.
I don't have to be careful. I got a gun.
So there's debate about the usefulness of the Oxford comma, which is why some people use it and some people don't. You use it to a fault, you said, Emily Brewster. So why do you think it's important to use in your own personal correspondence?
At this point, it's just, 90% of the time it is really just habitual. And 10% of the time it actually does lend clarity. A lot of newspapers don't because it uses up space. And again, it's really, things are only muddled without it a very small percentage of the time. So it is truly about personal choice.
Now, I don't know what Anne's particular bent is, self-proclaimed Montague Word Police officer. Hopefully she doesn't pull me over as I drive through there on the way to work.
Only if you're saying bad things.
Yeah. And also, I'd like to say, Anne, if you're listening to this, maybe being word police, maybe what you'll learn, hopefully, from this word nerd segment is that if by word police you're going to be judging people harshly about how they use words and things, maybe Emily Brewster will disabuse you of that notion.
Maybe we're more on the side of word community engagement.
Yeah, I like that. Anything more about the Oxford comma that particularly titillates you, Emily Brewster?
Well, it is really fun to look at some of the consequences of omitting the Oxford comma. If people called it the Merriam-Webster comma, that would be okay with me. I personally prefer the serial comma. That's how I refer to it. There is a very famous but fictitious book dedication that goes like this. I'd like to thank my parents, comma, Ayn Rand and God. So that, if you put the comma after Ayn Rand, then the author is thanking their parents and Ayn Rand and God, which sounds like a normal thing for some people to do when they're dedicating a book. But if you leave out the Oxford comma, then you're asserting that your parents are indeed Ayn Rand and God.
And then you get to be Jesus's sibling.
Yeah. Or any member of the Republican Congress at this point. Maybe Ayn Rand Paul.
There's also a more controversial, famous example. We invited the strippers, comma, JFK and Stalin.
Where do these come from?
I
don't know. I don't know.
I feel like a lot of them were in that book, Eat, Shoots, and Leaves, which talk about this too.
Oh, yes. Although Steven Pinker may have a book that included some of these before that book was written. I'm not sure. Steven Pinker is a linguist. Lynn Truss is she might describe herself as a kind of word police person, right? She writes more on usage as opposed to linguistics, but they've both treated it. Lots of other people have too. The Oxford comma, the serial comma is something that people feel passionately about and they like to talk about it. I do know of a real example. I think this also was in Steven Pinker's book. This one is like definitely true. Among those interviewed were Merle Haggard's two ex-wives, Chris Christopherson and Robert Duvall.
That would be so amazing. I want to watch that cowboy movie and or hear that album.
Help me make it through the night.
This is business, not personal, Sonny.
So there's a comma after the word ex-wives, and then you just have that phrase, Chris Christopherson and Robert Duvall. In order for this to work, the first noun you mention has to be broad and unspecific, right? It can't refer to a particular person. It can refer to a category of person, and then it has to be followed by to specific items that laughingly don't, obviously don't qualify as being the reference of that broad noun.
See, this is why I believe it's good that you're continuing to use the Oxford comma, Emily Brewster, and advocate for it because of clarity. But there are going to be times where it's not necessary. I think I'm guilty of those times trying to differentiate and not using it too frequently.
I just throw all the commas in because the more I have, the more I can pause and make it easier for people to get what I'm actually saying.
Since I knew we were going to talk about this, I got out one of my favorite books that I would absolutely want to recommend to people. It is called Shady Characters. It's written by Keith Houston, and the subtitle is The Secret Life of Punctuation, Symbols, and Other Typographical Marks.
I love it.
It is very, very interesting. According to Mr. Houston, the comma comes from some of the very, very earliest marks, which apparently were made by Aristophanes when he was, had to do something with that library in Alexandria. I think he was in charge of it, actually.
Good job with that one.
Well, I don't know.
You ruined it for all of us.
No.
Where was their sprinkler system?
I know, right?
So before Aristophanes started putting in dots at this point, there were none. There were absolutely none. Everything was run in together in all just one string of letters. And not only does it run in, but boustrophodon writing.
Whoa. That's my favorite dinosaur.
Right? Boustrophodon. Boustrophodon writing places the letters of the words like you're plowing a field. So you go left to right, and then you turn to the next line and you go right to left.
Oh.
And then on the next line, you go left to right, and then right to left.
Interesting.
And at this time, what is understood is that writing was something that was almost always done out loud. People were not reading quietly to themselves. They were just reading aloud. And Aristophanes started putting in 3 different kinds of dot. One would be a high dot, a middle dot, and a low dot. And the middle dot was what eventually became the comma. And it was called the comma because he placed it after a rhetorical device that was called the comma. So it wasn't actually, it was really about what the thing marked as opposed to what the thing was. But that is where we got our word comma.
What was the rhetorical device comma like? How was it used?
I don't know that. Mr. Houston has failed me on this account. It signaled a pause, signaled a middle pause, which is very similar to what it does now, right? We have a period signals a longer pause, and a comma signals a shorter pause.
And a comma could be an indeterminate amount of pause.
Yeah.
His website is really fun, by the way. I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, are you? Yeah, it's a really fun book.
I did not know that the number symbol was called an octothorpe.
Oh, yes.
Amazing.
Yes. That's so cool.
The pound
but
sign
nobody knows
number
why.
symbol?
Yeah, the pound sign is called an octothorpe.
Now the hashtag, which is even worse than the pound sign.
I know, that's way bad. That's not nearly as...
We're going to have to revive it. Hashtag Octothorpe. I want to start a movement. Hashtag Octothorpe.
Doesn't that just make it redundant?
Yes, and that's what I love about it.
Oh, no.
The book, again, is Shady Characters by Keith Houston.
But if you head over to shadycharacters.co.uk, you can see what we're talking about.
Oh, fun.
Do either of you have feelings about the comma splice?
Oh.
No, because I don't know what it is.
In some corners, it's a crime.
I am guilty of using it also too much, but that's usually because my sentences run very long.
What is a comma splice?
A comma splice is simply where you use a comma where a period is really strictly prescribed.
Oh, yeah.
The comma would be fine if you put an and in there, for example. I love punctuation. It's super fun. But if I just put a comma, I love punctuation, comma, it's super fun. That would be a comma splice.
Yeah.
But if I put I love punctuation, comma, and it is super fun, or because, then you wouldn't need the comma at all. It's really just putting a comma where a period is strictly required.
Guilty.
Yeah.
I try to be better about it, though. I try to write short sentences.
In informal writing, I really love comma splices. I feel like they're a way of keeping the momentum going. And I do find myself, I don't know, do either of you use punctuation less in texting than you ever did in email?
No.
That is a trend that has been noted. I certainly am, I've been pushed along with it also.
Yeah, my children don't like when you put a period in your text because then it supposedly means that you're kind of angry.
That's not, no.
Language changes. Don't be a word cop.
It's not. I'm not being a word cop. It's more of a. There is this interesting discussion happening on TikTok that my sister is definitely a part of, and now I have been drawn into about the clarity that especially high-functioning people try to use in order to make what they mean come across as specifically as possible, which is part of why I use punctuation in texts.
Right. Being as clear as possible, I think, is beneficial. Even when I voice to text, I'm always like, Khalees, comma. Or I have to say Kaylee Ice to my phone. Kaylee Ice, comma.
My phone has finally started recognizing my name as my name. But you always have to say the punctuation. That's the part that feels weird.
Yeah.
When you're doing voice to text.
When you say period
like,
at the end
Monty,
of the sentence.
comma, da-da-da-da-da, comma, da-da, open parentheses, and I haven't gotten it to be able to do that yet. I have to go back and put that in.
Yeah. What do you do, Emily Brewster? Do you still use good punctuation in your text messages?
When I do voice to text, I do sometimes, I do that thing saying comma and period and all that. But in general, my practices for texting have changed a lot over the years, and I use much less punctuation than I used to. And I will sometimes even use emoji in places where in the past I might have used a punctuation mark.
I said LOL in a text for the first time ever last week, and I felt like a failure.
You used LOL for the first time?
I hate LOL,
in a text?
but I don't know why I did it.
I use haha and LOL.
Yeah, I use ha.
I use haha all the time. I don't know what I was thinking.
I don't know. LOL can have, it can be a little sarcastic.
Yeah, that's when I use lol. I use lol when I'm being sarcastic.
I think that is probably why I used it, because I wasn't really thinking what the person said was funny. I'll tell you off the air what it was, and you'll understand why.
It's so funny though, right? We are constantly encountering written language now in a way that we never ever have before. Like we as a species, right? There's so much written language, and so much of it now is really informal, very quickly produced, often not carefully thought through, and we are as humans finding ways to still communicate with one another. At least we don't have to wait like 2 weeks to clarify if somebody is mad at us for putting a period in a text.
Yeah. I mean,
for the letter to go and come back.
But also, you probably had to think a little bit more about what you were writing down, so you really meant it in those 2 weeks.
Yeah, and maybe you made a copy for yourself so you'd be able to cross-reference what you were talking about weeks ago when you wrote that letter, in case you forgot.
I mean, one could hope.
Yeah, there's that.
Look, who's got that kind of paper? Like, paper was...
All the founding fathers decided they wanted to do it that way. Right. I do think of the Hamilton musical a lot, though, because there is a part about the comma.
The letter I received from you 2 weeks ago, I noticed a comma in the middle of a phrase. Change the meaning. Did you intend this? One stroke and you've consumed my waking days. It says, my dearest Angelica. With a comma after dearest, you've written my dearest Angelica. Anyway, all this to say,
this is a really interesting grammatical musical moment here in Hamilton.
It's so easy to introduce ambiguity. I know the line you're talking about, and it was a letter, and she couldn't ask him to his face. She just had to wonder.
Yeah, and wait weeks.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, a big thank you to Anne, the self-declared Montague Word Police. We may get to some of your other topics in future shows. And if you're somebody who's listening and have topics that you would like us to address, like commas or the Oxford comma, like Anne did, you can send them our way. thefab413@nepm.org.
Or, if you want to figure out what a pilcrow is.
What is a pilcrow?
It's the paragraph thing, the backwards P.
Is that another thing that you just pulled from the Shady Characters website of Keith Houston?
Like I said, this site is fascinating.
Thank you, Emily Brewster.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Anne from Montague wrote again to suggest the Robert Frost line, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep," ellipses. It would have had a different sense if he had written, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep." If you always leave out the Oxford comma, then you lose the option of leaving it out in order to make its absence meaningful.
Coming up, bringing more communities together into the symphony when we speak with Springfield Symphony Orchestra about Havana Nights happening this Saturday night.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
This Saturday, February 10th, the Springfield Symphony Orchestra Pops present Havana Nights, a history-making Springfield Symphony Orchestra concert as the first Latin-themed performance hosted by the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, featuring the Mambo Kings, an Afro-Cuban Latin jazz ensemble, and soloist Camille Zamora.
It's being supported and sponsored by local Cuban-American businessman Cesar Ruiz, who I just saw earlier this week was part of Holyoke's new effort to build a volleyball complex to become the epicenter of sports in the area.
I mean, I would go play volleyball for sure.
Totally. And his Golden Years home care. Cesar and his networks are serving as a link for the SSO in reaching a more diverse audience and the Hispanic community. His outreach includes reaching out to public schools in Holyoke and Springfield.
We are joined by Camille Zamora and the president and CEO of Springfield Symphony, Paul Lambert, as well as Heather Guerin, Springfield Symphony Orchestra Director of Development. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a joy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Now,
Great to be here.
Last time we got to go to your house, and you got to come to our house this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we loved going to Symphony Hall, and we're excited to hear that Camille is coming back to Symphony Hall. We heard you knocked everybody's socks off at the 2002 Holiday Pops. Camille, what was that experience like?
Oh my goodness, I cannot wait. It is such a joy to be in Springfield. Incredible orchestra. Just really a treasure, just amazing playing and a lot of passion. And the hall is just a work of art, and the audiences are incredible. So I've been counting the minutes.
So have we.
And I will point out to you that there's a lot of sockless people who she did knock their socks off.
Practice good foot health care, even if you're going to go to a stellar Havana Nights at the Springfield Symphony
Make sure
Hall.
to regain your socks before you try to enter any other establishment. They may kick
No
you out.
shoes, no shirt, no service here.
I've pointed out to a lot of folks that a patron, actually, after the concert last Holiday Pops, pulled me aside and talking about Camille, said, "Oh my goodness, she was luminous." And I thought, wow, I've never been luminous in my life. It would be nice to be luminous, but she was. Yeah, exactly.
You all make it easy, I'll tell you. And it is so funny. I mean, this program in particular, it is very hard for people to stay in their seats. It is such an active, exciting program. And it's so fun for me because, of course, I always have the best seat in the house. I get to look into the audience all night long, and I just see people like fidgeting, wanting to get up and dance because the whole program is just with these driving Spanish dance rhythms. It's amazing.
Well, Paul, you're the president and CEO. Can we encourage people now to say that it's okay to dance, or what is that frowned upon in Symphony Hall?
I think the whole idea of this is people to have a wonderful time. No, and that's the idea. I mean, I don't know that a lot of our patrons will jump up in the aisles and dance, but at the same time, you know what? If someone feels to move a little bit, I think that'd be a wonderful thing.
I think if you do a good job reaching out to the Latino communities of Springfield and Holyoke, there's a better chance that there might be some dancing in the aisles.
Absolutely.
I think the beautiful thing about Symphony Hall is that once you get that energy moving in there, it's really hard to stay in your seat. Once you see what can be happening, and Camille's voice is just incredible. So it should encourage a lot of movement on Saturday night.
And as you all know, when you're live in the space where the live music happens, and you have not only the Mambo Kings and Camille, but you have 65 members of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra all playing on stage. It's just this overwhelming energy that comes off the stage. Beautiful music, and the acoustics are so good in Symphony Hall. It's really a very special experience to be there.
Yeah, so the life and breath of live music really like getting into people when you're in those seats. It's
That's
wonderful.
Right.
We've talked around the program. Can we talk specifically about this program and what makes it so special?
Camille, what are you excited about?
I have to say, this music is just my joy. It's the music I grew up with, the music of my dad, and it's actually an incredible survey of Spanish music. We have everything from sort of 17th century zarzuela arias, a few of these sort of like basically Spanish opera, which is super grand and exciting. And it has all of that sort of Olympic vocal energy of opera, but again, mixed with this driving Spanish beat, which is so cool. And so we have everything from that to, Celia Cruz, amazing Cuban music. We have some incredible Mexican surprises. And then, of course, we have Tito Puente and Spanish Harlem. And, it just runs the gamut. And I think the thing that's so fun is hearing these beautiful melodies, some of which are very familiar, but hearing them in that orchestral palette, it's just like this cushion of sound. And yeah, it's a visceral experience.
And there's a lot of dance music built in. There's mambos, there's tangos, there's all kinds of rhythms and different music that'll be presented. So it'll be hard to stay in your seat.
There's something beautiful when you take music that is often associated with pop and then give it an orchestra to interpret it. It just becomes like bigger and more expansive in really cool ways that I think we're all expecting to hear this weekend.
I think the intensity of it once you do that is really something special. I also think it provides an opportunity for someone who may have never experienced the symphony orchestra and may be a bit intimidated by the traditional classical sense of music to come and experience something, to have that hands-on moment and that, oh my goodness, this is what we can do here experience. And then it kind of opens up your palette because it's breathtaking. It's a transformational experience once you're in there and the music just starts. It takes you to another place. I cry often, but we don't have to talk about that.
Same, Heather.
It's the good tears, those tears of, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm witnessing this in my hometown of Springfield, Massachusetts. How lucky are we to have this here?
And that is Heather Guerin, who's the Springfield Symphony Orchestra Director of Development. We're also joined by the President and CEO of the SSO, Paul Lambert, and the soloist for this Saturday night's performance, Camille Zamora, part of Havana Nights, a groundbreaking first for the Springfield Symphony Orchestra. Now, Camille, your CV is incredible, from playing at Carnegie Hall to playing with, all sorts of symphony orchestras across this country, playing at the Capitol and the Kennedy Center, playing with Yo-Yo Ma. You also mentioned that this music that you'll be playing is your dad's music, the music that you grew up with. Did you grow up with it in a symphonic setting, or did you grow up with it more in like a dance hall type setting? And how does it feel transitioning between those two seemingly disparate worlds that will come together at Symphony Hall this Saturday?
And what do you bring of one to the other when you're performing in one place or the other?
Oh my goodness, I'm loving these questions. So first of all, my wacky career, I feel super fortunate. I have this sort of omnivorous career. I've sung a lot of different styles and with some of the most glorious collaborators you could ever dream of. The funny thing is, actually, my whole life, my dad was one of 7 kids, and they all grew up, playing guitar and singing these funny old Spanish songs. My sweet grandpa used to serenade my grandma, and this super musical household, it was just sort of oxygen in a way on my dad's side of the family. And I was lucky enough, I grew up in between Texas and Mexico City, and in Houston, where I grew up, we had really good public school music, which I know Springfield has some amazing public school music programs going on right now. We had just great choruses in the schools that I was going to. And then I got to high school, and by the time I was there, my awesome choral teacher said, listen, you really have a voice. Let's see how far you can take this. So lucky enough to go to Juilliard and start my opera career. But this Spanish music that I started with was always my sort of guilty pleasure. I'd have these wonderful Mozartian heroines that I would be singing on stage, but it would be these beautiful little boleros and tangos and traditional songs that I would warm up with in my dressing room. And it was actually through sheer good fortune, my wonderful manager, Jamie Greenberg Artists, said, let's talk about building some shows around this music that you really love. And we realized, wow, there's such an opportunity. For one thing, the Latin Hispanic demographic in our country is this incredible, vibrant, growing demographic, but a demographic that a lot of times hasn't necessarily felt the symphonic doors wide open to them. And this is a way to bring in new audiences. And it's incredible to hear it on the grand orchestral size and scope, to hear these traditional songs that are in the most technicolor orchestral versions.
And that's a big part of this whole evening, we hope, other than inviting new audiences. And it's quite intentional, as you can imagine, on our part, to find ways to engage the diversity of this wonderful place that we live. We've talked so often about finding ways to touch all the communities that make up our community and bring people together around this great gift we have of having a symphony orchestra in Springfield, Massachusetts in 2024. Still kind of a miracle. But we really want people to come in and have some joy. The news is just so damn sad, in with all respect, these days.
It's so true.
I think we just need people to come in and just let it go for a couple of hours, and sing and dance and laugh and enjoy the music and feel some joy in your heart.
More about Springfield Symphony Orchestra's Saturday program of Havana Nights coming up.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We continue our conversation with Paul Lambert and Heather Guerin from the Springfield Symphony Orchestra and soloist Camille Zamora, who will be featured this Saturday at Springfield Symphony Hall for Havana Nights.
Symphonies that are willing to do popular music, it's not that they're rare, but they're inherently of the people, not just making sure that you're doing like art music or like quote unquote classical, because we still don't have a proper name for orchestral music. You can't just name it after one of the time periods.
Great point.
It's just
very true.
It is a thing that annoyed my music major brain for years. Just like, really, we named the whole thing after this 110-year period? Yeah. Come on.
If it ain't Baroque, don't fix it.
No, get off.
Wow.
You had to drop that in.
Yeah.
Yes. Everyone groans.
You have to with that one. I think what you said is so accurate, and I think it's something that Paul and I and the entire team at the SSO right now feel so deeply, is that we have to be incredibly open-minded and aware of this world that we live in. And it's not the world of 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 25 years ago, and that there are these amazing new artists that we can combine with these old artists and these different genres that can bring people together. And music is one of the only things in this world, in my opinion, that can truly cross every barrier and can bring people together, because you have to, I feel like, actually try to not feel it in your bones when you're in an experience like this. And it allows us to bring something to people of every single age too. We have little kids that come to these concerts, and people have been coming to these concerts for years and years and years, and it allows us to educate them on what else is out there and hopefully open their minds to expanding what we can be as an organization here.
And I love hybrid concerts. That work with some of the traditional music, or folks music that I love. I've been a subscriber to the Symphony Orchestra for 20 years. I love that music. And I grew up, my mom and dad always took us to concerts, and I love what many people would call that kind of traditional classical music, and that's great. But we keep discovering, and my ears and eyes keep being opened to so many more traditions of remarkable music going back centuries in some cases, but also happening today. This is a live art form. I never want people to think they're coming to a museum piece. This is a living art form. And I also love to remind everybody it's fun. It's exciting. Come on out and have a great time.
But like the beauty of it is that it's almost time traveling, hybrid concerts like this, because you get, like Camille was mentioning, like you've got Spanish arias that are from, like let's say like 18th century, like 19th century, but you've also got like mambo, which is a modern like 20th century, like late 19th, like 20th century form. The ability to combine all of those histories and all of those contexts together is a thing that is uniquely possible in programs like this. And it does really act as that bridge between what people think classical is and what classical can be, what orchestral music can be and do. And both the programs that we've talked to you about have really done that in a very cool way. And I'm going to stop talking and being like, I'm so happy about this program. It's the coolest thing.
Yeah,
but it is the coolest thing now.
But Camille mentioned, we're also, as you look at the industry, there are so many talented people. It's overwhelming. Not just the talent of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra members individually. It's remarkable. She mentioned Jamie Greenberg and the great arrangements, Jeff Tyzik and some of the other people working on this show. You can't just put treacle out there. This is really wonderfully well thought through programming. It's tremendously exciting to listen to.
The program is Springfield Symphony Orchestra's Pops presenting Havana Nights this Saturday night at Springfield Symphony Hall, featuring the Mambo Kings and soloist Camille Zamora. It's an intentional way to reach out to the Latino community of the greater Springfield area. And you were mentioning, Camille, as a soloist, that this wasn't necessarily a world that you started growing up in, but now that you have hit the highest upper echelons of this world of symphonic music. When you meet somebody from specifically the Latinx community who is exposed to this big symphony style of music, what have you seen any interesting reactions similar to yours, where their worlds have expanded in some way?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. I do have to reference it. There was a little moment this summer, this past summer, when I was with the Mambo Kings, and we were doing the unplugged version, as I mentioned, and the non-orchestral version. And it's a tour. I mean, that's another fun thing. We talk to the audience and we visit these different countries, and we make our corny jokes about not having to bring your passport and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the wonderful thing is that you really see people's eyes light up. And again, I have that privileged position. I get to look out at the audience and see these eyes light up. And then I'll never forget, we plunged into this old classic sort of chestnut. And again, these were the songs that my dad loved so much. And there's this song that you may know called Perfidia, which is this beautiful sort of romantic song. And I literally saw this gentleman kind of, his shoulders sort of heaving. You could tell he was kind of, honestly, he was sort of sobbing, because this is music that is so poignant, and it is kind of lost in a sense, in that it's not that often performed live. These are these old chestnuts, and I think definitely for some older audience members, it's profoundly reminiscent of a sort of bygone era. And then what I also love is folks who have never heard any Spanish or Latin music, are a lot of sort of traditional symphony subscribers who are used to their beautiful diet of, the great German masters and all of that good stuff. And they've never heard Spanish classical music. And they're like, wait, what is this? It's like Giuseppe Verdi meets your favorite salsa bar. It's like,
I love it.
What is this? And people really come alive to it. The origins of Spanish expression musically are so interesting, because of course a lot of it was actually born in northern Africa in the minarets. It's the call to prayer and that bent second scale degree where you hear this wonderful sort of modal tone that traveled up through the Iberian Peninsula, fused with gypsy expression, and became flamenco. And flamenco forms the basis of a lot of what we consider to be sort of that Spanish classical sound. So there's a whole world tour built into this concert.
I can't wait. It seems so exciting. Camille Zamora
Yay.
is the soloist for Havana Nights, which will be guest conducted by Nick Palmer, who's a frequent pops conductor with the Springfield Symphony Orchestra. And
Sorry, I'm pointing at my auntie because I have one last question. Kind of flipping that last question on its head, Camille, is there something that you've learned in these past 5 years working with the Mambo Kings that you've taken from the context of working with them and used in like more traditional, more classical forms?
Oh, what a great question. Definitely it's funny, the element of give and take, sort of the improv vibe, that's not surprising that I've sort of taken some of that from them. But also, interestingly enough, what's funny is the rhythmic vigor, because one of the things about a lot of the music that I sing, soprano that I am, is that I get to hang out on the high note, to my heart's content. I'll hang out here. Oh, okay, I'm going to catch the maestro's eye, and we'll come down to resolve the chord. The interesting thing is actually performing with Latin jazz ensemble, not so much hanging out on the high note. It's about a driving dance rhythm, and you don't want the dancers to like fall over while you hang out on a certain note. So I think I've learned to kind of definitely never lose touch with my inner sort of heartbeat metronome that drives the dance rhythm forward.
Two forms of breath control, very different.
Yeah. Yes, well said.
Camille Zamora, the soloist for Havana Nights this Saturday at the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, and Paul Lambert and Heather Guerin from the Springfield Symphony Orchestra. Thank you so much for sharing about this concert happening this Saturday night right here down the street from the NEPM studios.
It's a joy to be with you. Thanks so much for having us.
And the program looks amazing.
Encantada.
Come on now.
Encantada. Nos vemos el sábado.
Sí.
Wear your dancing shoes.
Hasta luego.
Yes,
Nos vemos.
please do.
Bring
Nos
some
vemos.
joy.
Ciao.
Tomorrow on the Fabulous 413, we've got some ways that you can directly interact with Black History Month, including a gathering in Northampton's College Church and several lectures at STCC.
We'll chat with Northampton Councilor at Large Garrick Perry and organizer Marcia Morris about the event, Black History from Christian Abolitionism to White Fragility.
And we'll talk with the Reverend Talbert Swan and Ayanna Crawford about the Lift Every Voice speaker series, along with their first speaker, producer Domingo Guyton.
And our weekly chat with Congressman Jim McGovern. Got a question for the representative? Email us at thefab413@nepm.org.
We leave you with the iconic voice who you can hear on Saturday night at Springfield Symphony Hall.
After thanking the fabulous 413 tech team.
Yeah. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Chuck. We haven't thanked Chuck in a long time.
I know.
Chuck,
Sharp Cheddar Dubé.
Sharp Cheddar Dubé, and Bart Rankin as well. as Kara Foster, and Tony Dunn in absentia. Here's Camille Zamora. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.